I think we get caught up in the belief that our favorite artists are totally original in every way. We forget that all the most well-renowned musicians who have ever lived have been influenced by the past and were once so-called fans too. For Red Hot Chili Peppers guitarist John Frusciante, channeling his inspirations have led to some of the biggest rock songs of all time. Give It Away, Californication, Snow, Under the Bridge. These classics don't get made in a vacuum. So what characteristics did John Frusciante borrow to come up with his own style? And what is it that makes him one of the most amazing and influential guitarists of the last 30 years? As the classical composer Stravinsky once said, good composers borrow, great composers steal.
He's got that mad scientist, guitar, art, love, spirit, genius in him, but he doesn't know how to drive a car. He doesn't have a credit card. He doesn't function in the same road with the rest of the world, which is what makes him great.
By 1991, John Frusciante was coming into his own. After joining the Red Hot Chili Peppers in 1988 and mostly taking a back seat to the writing of the Mother's Milk album, John had slowly gained more confidence in his songwriting and guitar playing. All four members were now tucked away in an LA mansion they had rented out to write and record what would become Blood Sugar Sex Magik. And John was now not afraid to speak his mind and bring new ideas to the table.
I've never taken anything so seriously in my life, and I've never been so proud of anything that I've ever done, because I've always felt like I was a failure, and now we've done something as a band of friends that I'm 100% proud of.
It was on Blood Sugar where John really figured out how to draw from the biggest influence on his guitar playing, the guy who made John want to pick up the instrument as a kid, Jimi Hendrix. It's that well of inspiration where the album's most iconic song, Under the Bridge, took form.
For me, I really associate that playing with Jimi Hendrix. That's where I learned it from. When I was a little kid and I heard Little Wing. That kind of playing, it took me a while because it exists on so many levels. You've got the chord being played, and then you've got a sort of a lead part going on top of it, and then you also get on top of the lead part these extra strings that are being barred that are on the high strings. It ends up sounding, to the ear of somebody who doesn't know how to play guitar, it really sounds like it's like three guitars at once.
That upbeat, semi-solo bluesy guitar was an interesting choice for a song as heavy lyrically as Under the Bridge, but it was a deliberate choice by John due to frontman Anthony Kiedis' heavy morose subject matter about drug addiction and being on the streets of LA. A part of that upbeat, bluesy guitar in Under the Bridge is a finger technique John got from Jimmy as well. Instead of using his thumb as an anchor for the rest of his fingers, Jimmy would wrap his thumb all the way around to play the notes on the top E string. It freed up his other fingers to play more freely. It's a style John had mimicked from Jimmy since he was a kid, and it was part of Jimmy's brilliance that allowed him to create such unique sounding songs.
In 7th grade, I would walk into music stores and just everybody would think I was an amazing guy because I was about this tall and I could play all these Hendrix songs.
Oh, really? And I remember I thought about it a lot, and I decided that nobody could possibly know how to play Little Wing. Like I felt like that it's in the category of impossible to play.
When you hear Jimi Hendrix play, it's a pure expression of him as a person. You see him on stage, and there's absolutely no separation between him and his guitar. They're completely one because he's just putting every single bit of everything in his whole psyche and every single part of his body into his guitar playing.
But it wasn't just Jimi Hendrix that flavored John's guitar on Under the Bridge. He also used an amalgamation of guitar parts from some of his favorite songs of the 70s.
You know what? It's a rip-off of Andy Warhol by David Bowie, You know how it goes, Well, at that point, that's a rip-off of T-Rex. Who's the T-Rex song? It goes, the song called Rip Off, so I thought that was interesting.
It's not surprising that a large portion of John's guitar influence came from David Bowie, T-Rex, Jimi Hendrix, and that peak of guitar rock in the 60s and 70s, but it was another one of John's guitar heroes that was a bit unconventional and helped John find his love of funk. Before he was in the Red Hot Chili Peppers, he was a fan of the Red Hot Chili Peppers and a massive fan of original guitarist Hillel Slovak. Hillel's simplified, no-frills funk guitar was intentional. It allowed Flea to be Flea on the bass guitar. By the time of Blood Sugar Sex Magik, John had honed in on that rhythmic side of playing to let Flea take over at certain times. It's not flashy by any means, but it's part of what's doing best for each song individually, and a staple throughout the history of the funk genre.
That's like just barely pressing down on the strings, you know, to get the real percussive, funky sound. That was the original idea with the James Brown stuff, I guess, was to make the guitar more like a percussion instrument rather than like a guitar. So it's basically just barely pressing down. For me, that kind of playing has everything to do with just making sure that your right hand can just be really precise with stuff like that and just be really deep in the groove.
For guitar style, John drew mainly from Jimi Hendrix in that 60s, 70s era, with funk players like Hillel Slovak also being a big inspiration. But when it came to an overall musical ethos, John was drawn by the complete opposite end of the spectrum in punk rock. Punk was John's first musical obsession as a kid. He played the Germs record G.I. over and over, studying Pat Smear's guitar parts. It might sound contradictory to his love of Hendrix and his flashy playing style, but punk rock taught John to play only what serves the song best. Being in a band wasn't about showing off your guitar skills, and it was similar to what he learned from listening to Hillel's funk playing opposite Flea on bass.
The idea is to make sounds that are good, and in music, that's really so much about the relationships between the different things. So like, I'm not thinking in terms of, oh good, they're giving me a blank canvas, now I can go crazy over it. Like it's more like constant interaction with the other people playing.
You hear that bare minimum, serving only what's best for the song style of guitar playing on the Californication album. By the time Californication came around in the late 90s, John had been away from the band for about 6 years. After quitting, he had spiraled deep into drug addiction and mostly put the guitar away. When he did come back to the band, he basically had to relearn the instrument. So as he redeveloped that muscle memory and technique, he found more simple ways to fit the needs of the songs. And so in Californication, Flea and drummer Chad Smith lead a lot of the tracks, and ironically it led to their most successful album, even to this day. Time away from the band matured John into a place where he didn't need to flaunt his technique on the guitar anymore and to play only what the song needed. By 2005, John was at the top of his game technically. He had regained all strength and technique from his years away from the band in the 90s, and after deciding to put the focus on vocal harmonies on By the Way, John decided to go all in on the guitar for his next new songwriting style. As the band got busy writing for their new record, Stadium Arcadium, John went back to his Jimi Hendrix roots. John was messing around with this very technical riff. It started off very Hendrix-like, but John worked on putting his own twist to it.
That sort of thing where you're going like, that got kind of Jimi Hendrix, like rhythm technique or whatever, but it had been done the way he did it a lot, and so doing it the way I did it on this song was just a different approach. So it doesn't sound like Jimi Hendrix, but in essence, it's not that far.
In the main riff of Snow, John is doing something Jimi made famous on the guitar, arpeggiating guitar chords, meaning he places his fingers in a different pattern on the fretboard than what's taught conventionally. It gives the riff a unique sound. John is also using a technique Hendrix made famous to play complicated riffs easier, called hammer-ons and pull-offs. It allows him to play notes without strumming the guitar string. You hear it most famously in the Under the Bridge riff, too. Although his guitar skills really shine on the Stadium Arcadium album, looking back through his solo work truly shows how eclectic his style can get. John has said that he goes into each new album project with no preconceived idea of what styles he wants to combine, and that without change, he'd have no interest in making music anymore. Avant-garde acts such as Syd Barrett, Captain Beefheart, Frank Zappa, and the Velvet Underground come through in John's more experimental mid-90s albums. By normal person standards, John is a weird dude. As Anthony said, he's a master guitar player and songwriter, but doesn't know how to drive a car. John has said he literally practices guitar 10 hours a day at times. But the way John doesn't think like most people is probably what makes him a genius musician.
It's like I'm in the fourth dimension and somebody's asking me to describe it verbally, and that's what the fourth dimension is all about, is no words, no symbols, no images, all pure, real energy.
You see his instinct to be unconventional in some of his post-Stadium Arcadium solo work as well, dipping his toes into experimental house and acid house music with his love of bands like New Order, Aphex Twin, and Kraftwerk. As Stravinsky once said, good composers borrow, great composers steal. And what he meant by that was that any artist is doing themselves a disservice by ignoring the groundwork laid behind them by artists of the past. They take elements from all of their influences and mix it together into a stew to come up with something totally new and original. You can't call John's style a Hendrix ripoff, you can't call it a Hillel Slovak ripoff, and you can't call it a punk rock ripoff. It's a blend of everything, and then some, and also ever-changing. At the end of the day, it's not bad to sound like another person. It's how you learn to produce music you yourself would like. It's how you learn to grow. It's how you learn to sound like yourself.